Wyman joining us. Casey is currently at the Air Force Academy. He's the Director of Finance, Chief Financial Officer. He's been there about a year. We are quite thankful. He's been in the service for 24 years, and he is going to share a presentation with you today. We have reserved times for question and answering at the end, so just know that you have that as you have questions as he's presenting. So without further ado, Casey, the floor is yours.
Ooh, all right, there we go. I like that. Great introduction, and so all great presentations are made possible not by the presenter, by the amazing staff up there. So Zealand, Brian, the collective team, Stacy and everyone, thanks for the logistics to get this together today. So that's my big name up there. First, I didn't realize it was going to be that big, so it's kind of nice to be able to do that. And what they did was they gave me a little bit of structure to talk today as an open presentation. And so I've given a lot of presentations in my time. I've never given an open presentation, so this should be a little interesting, a little bit of a learning environment. But this is the relative structure of what we're going to talk about. And I got to just start with a big moment of reflection. And so it referenced that I had been serving for 24 years. And so for 24 years, I have taken the stage. I've been in leadership positions. I have embraced whatever command or authority that has been bestowed upon me. And I had never had to once pick what I was going to wear. And so if this is bad, I'm welcome to feedback. And then also, I've always been introduced with a rank. And so for the first time, I'm Mr. And I'm really excited about being Mr. So thanks for bearing with me as I reflect on the fact that this is literally the first time I've ever been in this environment. But not the first time I've ever done a public speaking engagement. So just a quick moment of reflection. And so before I get into the amazing photo on the left, I want to be able to just get a little bit of a feel for who's in the room. So if you are faculty, a little crowd participation, hands up. So I know the audience. If you are a member of the local community, perhaps not affiliated with the school. If you are part of the hiring committee, I know there's a lot in here. Okay. And are there any students in here? Okay, so nobody took the opportunity to miss class today. That's interesting. I thought I was going to have like a full packed house, and it was like, this is a way to get out of class, but I guess not. So it's good to know who I'm talking to, and hopefully you're able to gain a better perspective of what I would offer to the UVU family. I truly am honored to be here. I think that this environment is something that I will thrive in, and hopefully at the end of this, you'll at least gain a little understanding of who I am and what value I'll bring to the team. So now the fun stuff, because you don't want to hear me talk, right? You want to look at the beautiful photo up here. So that's my wife, Anna. We've been married for 7 years. And she had one big rule before she got married, and she said she would never marry a military person. I said, okay, great, I'm in the military, let's get married. She said, okay. There's a great story about how we met, maybe for another time. But Anna is by far the light that I get to see each and every day. So she's up there, and then on her back is my 5-year-old, and so that's Vera. And so Vera is someone who follows the rules, and she's great. She tries to please everyone. She wakes up in the morning. She said, Dad, I want to start making my bed. I said, okay, I don't even know why you're going to do that, but sure, I will let you make your bed. We have a chore chart. She does it every day. She's amazing. And because God gave us such a great first child, I said, let's play roll the dice one more time. And so Peggy, who is in the front, is my 3-year-old, and she is the exact opposite of Vera. But she is all spirit and all love. And so if it's quiet for too long and you don't see her, there's a good chance that you're going to get to see a streaker through the living room and all the way upstairs laughing the entire time. She is so funny and just a great level of chaos to add to the Wyman household. And then we said, we've gone this far, let's do it one more time because we need to be able to get the prince in the house. And so this is Elias, he's baby boy, he is 1 year old. All he and I do is just sit back and watch the chaos unravel. And sometimes we just go and do our own thing that guys do. And so this is my family. And stepping into a leadership role, you bring the family with you, and then you join another family. And so in the military, they say you have 2 families, and you wear them each and every day on your chest. You have, in my case, the Air Force family, and then also my family name. And so I'm taking off one of those, and I'm proud to be a veteran, but I will always be this type of family as well, too. And now you get to at least see what I get to go home to each and every day, and I'm really excited about that. So 24 years of service is not an easy task, and I don't really know where the time went, but 24 years is up, and we're looking at the next chapter now. And so I referenced a couple times about the bridge I have, and I have a really great timeline to be able to explore options. And we'll get into the why of UVU in a little bit. But after 24 years, for the last 5 years, I've been a chief financial officer at a military installation. So 2 years at Tucson, Arizona, 2 years up in Anchorage at Joint Base Elmendorf in Richardson, and then 1 year at the United States Air Force Academy. So those are just the last 5 years where I've been bestowed the responsibility to be a chief financial officer. And while only one of those is higher education, I can assure you that the experience in those other assignments yield very similar operating environment for me to be able to step into that role. And so I feel confident in the ability to step into this role as probably an 85 to 90% solution. But not just those assignments. And so 24 years of service, that means I got to move every 2 years. So I'm batting 50%. So I've moved 12 times, and that doesn't include some combat tours as well, where I've stepped out into different environments too. I've done a host of things within financial management, from the accountants to the people who with the little GTC card or the purchase cards to auditors to everything in between. And so very enjoyable time and well equipped again from the responsibility standpoint to understand the lowest level up to where I would potentially sit as the VP of Finance. And then across those 24 years, you would think to yourself, there's probably some values there, and I think it's really important to share some of the values that I have, because while I don't expect UVU to share those values, I think there's definitely going to be some similarities, and then potentially as I work with each and every one of you, you'll understand a little bit of the perspective of why I'm doing the things I do. And so the first thing is the pursuit of excellence. Notice I didn't say to achieve or I'm asking for perfection or anything like that. It's just the pursuit of it. And so if time were unlimited and resources were unlimited, I could probably get to the point of perfection. That's just not the environment that we live in, right? And so we are in a constrained resource environment, and we should be striving to pursue that level of excellence. And sometimes that can be the platinum standard, sometimes that can be the gold, silver, bronze, copper, whatever you want. You have to be able to hedge that expectation and work through the pursuit. And so over the course of my time in the Air Force, I have challenged the team to grow just a little bit each and every time we do something, especially in the financial world. It's repetitive in nature on purpose, but we want to improve just a little bit more. We want to be able to stretch that dollar one more time. We want to be able to pivot just a little bit better to make sure that we get the highest level of return on investment. And so that pursuit is important to me as a value. Selfless service. It probably goes undoubtedly obvious at this point, specifically because you're in the United States of America and everyone is relatively a patriot. I think I've been thanked countless times at this point already just today, so thank you for the support. But what I would say is I have served in that capacity, and service doesn't end when you take the uniform off. And so what I'm looking for is that next level of service now. And as I think through what it means to be part of the UVU family, I think through an opportunity to continue that service. And so the VP positions are not taken lightly. You can be fired, within that 24-hour period if you do something illegal, unethical, or immoral. And so I would like to be able to continue that service, not necessarily through active duty, but within the university and the higher education system. And unwavering integrity. It's easy to say that we have integrity. If we were to ask what that definition is, it's doing what's right when no one's looking. As a VP of Finance, I can tell you I'm looking, right? And so you have to have the ability, you have to have the grit, the gumption to be able to come forward and say, I've potentially found something. And then more so when you think about critical restrained resources like taxpayer dollars, like tuition, people are saving their life savings to come here. And now we're going to make sure that we utilize those resources properly. And so having unwavering integrity is extremely important to me, even when it's the tough conversation. When I got to go in front of the president and say, hey, there's been a mistake or I've uncovered fraud or whatever it may be, you have to have that. So an important value. And then the last part is team development. And so the honor of being in a leadership position is also a requirement to mentor and mold the next generation as they come behind you. And so that is something that I get passionate about. And so if you haven't gotten passionate about finance, at least get passionate about mentoring and developing your team. And so I think I was told that the finance division has a few hundred folks, and then quite a few of them are part-time, and then there's a pretty good cohort that are full-time. What I would love to be able to do is develop that team, whereas one day that I get to take off the figurative uniform in this case, potentially after 43 years, then that team is going to be able to succeed as they go forward. And so developing the team is extremely important to me. It's one of my core values that I look for that I would love to be able to bring. And so you probably ask yourself, why am I interested in joining this team? Hopefully it's obvious, but when you Google UVU, if you haven't done it, I'd recommend you do it and say, probably start with something like, why do people love UVU? The two big things that come up first are safety. And so if my 5-year-old were here, I would ask her, I'd say, Vera, what do we always think about? And then her candid response is always safety. So if you have kids, you probably know what I'm talking about. They are not safe, right? And so you have to instill that at the lowest level all the time. And it is also important to me in a safe environment, not only physical safety, but also the ability within the workplace. And so when you think through workplace hostilities, bullying, an environment where sexual assault and sexual violence is actually taken seriously and moved forward to be removed. All of those things are important to me and wrapped under the safety umbrella, and that came back as one of the highest accolades of why people love UVU, is that this is a safe campus and it's free of those things. And so that meant a lot to me as I looked through it. And then the second thing, which was really the first thing, is that UVU has a high level of morale. And so if you've ever done any type of research on U.S. military history, you will know that we are batting a really good percentage when it comes to waging war. But that isn't just because we have the best airmen or the best soldiers or sailors or Marines or the best equipment. It's because we have folks focused in on things like morale. And so can you look to your left and can you look to your right and say that you trust this individual? Do you enjoy what you do every day? Those levels of things, while it may seem obvious, are really important to me. And UVU comes back with an extremely high level of morale, which was amazing. As I was thinking about it, I was like, man, this is great. So as I looked across all of the open VP positions, there were about 100 of them. UVU rose to the top because of those two things. So that's it from the introduction side. And then, just like anything else, they want me to be able to talk through a little bit of a case study. And so instead of a case study, I put a Casey study. I thought that was fun. So as you think through, so you can read it, but I'm going to just kind of make it a little bit larger. And so when you're in charge of finance, I assure you, one, you'll always have friends. And two, everyone will come to you and say, hey, I got a good idea. Ooh, all right. So first and foremost, that culture is important because people are willing to come forward with those good ideas. It's not a draconian decision or culture that is set where people are not bringing those ideas forward. That's not what we want. We want folks to make time. Hey, can I get 15 minutes? Or hey, what do you think about this? Or interacting with students that have that ideas too, that energy. Those are the good things. In this case specifically, a division within the academic affairs they wanted to be able to work through it. And so I want the good idea, but my job is to take the good idea and then put a little business backing behind it. And so make that a reality, right? And so did you think about costs? Did you think about overhead? Did you think about travel? Did you think about accreditations and dollars associated with it? Did you think about buying a copier, right? And so funny story, we have a construction project being completed at the academy. Everyone's really excited. We started to prepare for a ribbon cutting ceremony. I said, this is great. Where's the stuff that goes in the buildings? Where's the desks, right? Where's the phones? I got a little bit of blank stares. And so luckily we had enough time to be able to expedite some of those orderings to make sure that we had the stuff inside the building squared away. So obviously I wasn't part of the initial planning because I would have caught that. But that was something that we had a quick glove save on, and that's a piece of it. And so really it's the first, I don't ever want to shut anyone down in this position. I want to be able to foster that relationship and then work with them to further develop it, to put it into a realization to say, maybe not this year, but next year we can get after this. Or, you know what, this is a great idea. Let's pivot some resources to make sure that we can scratch this itch right now. And then how I would do that, essentially I would look through, are we the only organization doing this? Is there anyone else in higher education? Can we branch out even farther into tech? Could we look at other benchmarking activities? And if we don't, then there are cost estimating philosophies and methodologies that you can utilize. Within the Air Force, there are 4 major ones. I actually spent 2 years developing a major weapon system. It was a small diameter bomb too. Really cool thing if you want to Google it later, but it's a bomb that gets the bad guy, let me just put it that way, with a high level of accuracy. But to do that, you have to be able to make an estimate. And so you have to start at the lowest level, engineer, build up, top to bottom, or bottom to top, and eventually it comes out with some numbers, and then you put it through a calculator and it comes out. And so what I would say is, as you work through this, depending on how complex that good idea is, would determine the method used, and then holistically that would inform senior leadership to determine a resourcing strategy. And then it kind of hit on it a little bit already, specifically on the what collaborations are needed. So historicals, closely aligned programs, and then next one is real big, is internal and external interest. Is this something that UVU wants to do because it's right for our students, or is this something potentially an appropriator wants to do? Or is there somebody else, the governor really is keen on this? There's ways to get after things, and all of those things holistically combined determine a confidence level that I would then be responsible to pitch or gain interest across the other cohorts to be able to resource. So relatively straightforward. I dropped the Y on the case study, so now we're back to very strict business on this end. And so what would I look like from an overview for new or reallocated costs? And so first, when you think about costs, contrary to popular belief, I don't have a printing press, right? I don't have something in the back where I'm like, all right, here's $2 million. Good luck, Jim, and spend it well, right? That's not the case. And so I only have a limited amount of resources. And so what I would need to do first is determine if, based on that previous one, is there an external method to get more? Well, I always like spending other people's money. But if not, then how do I find money internal? And that's where I've already had a couple great conversations about what is right for the institution may not be right for the department. And then getting that consensus to be able to offer resources. And so the way you get there is by building a strategic calendar. And so there's already one out there, so I don't get to take credit for that. But what I do get to think through is how we meet those milestones specific to that calendar. And so the way you do that is you back it up 30, 60 days, and then you create analysis and milestones associated with that calendar. And then if you're not meeting those marks, it's not that you lose the money forever, it's just that there's a higher need that the university could use. So I would probably look at it from that sense. Additionally, I would look at, they may have flipped the slides on that one, sorry about that. And so, you would look at it that way, and then again, you would put a holistic look to it. And so in the end, it would be a blended approach to resourcing. And so if you think through a 1, 3, and 5 year plan, what you would want to be able to do is have that iterative process. And so your 1 year plan for 5 years turns into a very good historical approach to what we're trying to get after. And then you never reach that 3 or 5 year plan, but it's something that you're trying to achieve. You would also need to be objective when you're dealing with this program. So if you're not meeting your milestones, maybe it wasn't as good an idea as we thought it was, then we have to be able to scale it back or ramp it up. But in the end of the day, it's not just let's throw a bunch of money at it, because it seems like it's something that is a narrative that we want to do that on. And then it kind of leads into that. And so you build multiple courses of action. You set incentives. So, hey, you know what? We're going to potentially look at 100 students going through it for the first year, but you get 150. Great. You know what? That means we also probably need to increase our level of capacity. Speaking of capacity, you probably want to do a capacity analysis anyways. But you look for conditions to continue the program, and then ultimately, and this is my favorite saying, and I know everyone here doesn't get excited about finance like I do, but the physical environment changes. And so if the physical environment changes, you got to be able to change with it. And so I've worked at the federal level for a very long time. And so if you've ever seen this place, it's called Washington, D.C., and a lot of things get talked about there, like a lot, right? And so they talk about it, but sometimes they don't really do anything. Sarcasm. And so as we work through this, that fiscal environment, you got to be receptive to the process, and then also be able to make sure that we don't ever want to violate any of the rules associated with money, because there are a lot of them, and that can be pretty tedious at times. So that's kind of the case analysis. I'm burning a little hot on time, so I'm going to move to the next one. Sorry. Oh, you guys saw that one? That's the guy. So I was told that I needed to put him on the presentation for some reason. So when you see Kyle, be like, dude, you're on Casey's presentation. He doesn't even know me. I just met him like 5 minutes ago. But I did watch the presidential address recently where she did the State of the University, and that was my first exposure to the president. She's very charismatic, and it drove me to listen intently, and she made some jokes about Kyle, so I wanted to also include this as well. Maybe it gets me more money, I don't know. So let's talk about how I would strategically leverage funds. And so now we're getting down to some of the technical side of what we do. First and foremost, there are multiple streams of money. And so knowing that I'm talking to non-financial managers, I don't want to get too geeky on this, but this is stuff that I really am passionate about. And so appropriated funding is a little bit like a softball question to me, because that's all I've ever dealt with. But I'll get there. And so when you deal with appropriators, what you need to be able to do is first understand who is appropriating, what committee they're a part of, and then figure out their interests. And so if their interest is dynamic and very robust towards AI or machine learning, then we need to not change our narrative, but we need to align our narrative through the president's priorities to show that appropriator that we are on board. A little bit of strategy play in there. And as I interact with the city, as I interact with the state, and potentially at the federal level, that is where you earn money at the appropriated side. And so it's easy to say, it's tough to get the meetings, but it's not you don't call someone on the first time and you ask for something. You call and say, hey, do you got a second? Let's go to lunch. Let's get some understanding of what we're trying to do. There are a lot of very specific rules in that engagement too. And then also there's a great way, especially at the university level, and I'm not allowed to do this on the federal side, but you can match money. And I talked to a few other peers within the university realm that I know who have stepped into the position from the Air Force side. And they said that this is a great way to entice some of that appropriated dollars. And so think through a 50 or 75, 25% matching program. Now all of a sudden we have skin in the game. And showing skin in the game not only means that we're going to take even better care of that money, but that we're committed to actually making the initiative work. And then also there's a follow-up associated with appropriated money. And so I'll use an example at the Air Force Academy. And so last year I got on the job, new lieutenant colonel, I'm on staff, I'm working for a 3-star, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a tough job because I got general officers breathing down my neck. I got senior leaders all about it. And I looked through the infrastructure of the academy. And it's not like this, by the way. You guys got it better. I looked through the infrastructure of the academy. I was like, well, we got some projects we got to get after. And so we defined a list of requirements, a little over 100 million. We engaged with an appropriator to say, hey, this is what we need. And she said, thanks. And that was it. I was like, well, that's not very nice. And so I kind of had to sit back and rethink about how can I be more strategic in this. And so if you understand the Air Force's corporate process, Big Air Force cares about Big Air Force, and then they level the playing field for everyone. The Academy is just one of 77 installations, and so everyone gets 1/77th of the pie. And so I didn't like that. I'm not a fair person when it comes to competition. That doesn't sound right. So I am a fair person, but I am competitive in nature when it comes to resources. And so what I did was I utilized that relationship with the appropriator to say, hey, we can't get it through Big Air Force, but you can go heavy-handed as an appropriator from Congress. And then all of a sudden they started to pique their interest about why we wanted to do that. And then I partnered with West Point and Annapolis to make it a team game. And I think you've done some great work here within the state of Utah to make it a team game. And so Now, all of a sudden, instead of just once a year when they want to send us money, we're meeting on a quarterly basis to update on those projects, to get interest in, to get buy-in to it, and have an understanding of the operating environment within those places. So all of those things yielded $35 million plus up this year. And I was like, that's kind of a win. But I want a little bit more. And so we continued this narrative, and now we're looking at a possible $75 million plus up next year. And so I say that not by saying I'm bringing $75 million to UVU. I'm saying that's the potential for strategic engagement, very deliberate on the actions, and it's not done overnight, but it's a little bit of a long game. The next one is non-appropriated funds, and so I would say 95% of my experience is within appropriated funds, 5% of that is within the non-appropriated fund side, and so if you think through any military organization, all right, I'll just be easy. I'll make an Air Force joke. If you think about any Air Force base, we have a golf course. Not every service gets that, okay? So we have a golf course. It's an amazing golf course, especially at the Air Force Academy. If you've ever been, I'd love to be able to play with you. But that is a non-appropriated source of funding. And so as the CFO, you have financial oversight. Not just oversight from an auditability standpoint, from a business operations standpoint. So inventory control, costs, pricing, labor, critical infrastructure, capital investments, the whole deal. And so first and foremost, if I were to be bestowed this responsibility of VP of Finance here, I would look at when do we have those touch points with our non-appropriated funds sourcing. And so if it's a quarterly basis, which I assume it would be, you would move to that, okay, and then what is talked about there? Is it just a dog and pony show where people are coming in and saying, this is my program, see you later, and they're trying to leave with no friction points? Going back to the developing the team piece, you want to be able to push those folks to think a little bit better, especially the business-minded individuals. The bookstore comes to mind probably here as the biggest one. And so as you interact with those folks, how can we do a little bit better? Have we best practice from anyone else? Have we consulted with Amazon Book? Have we done other things to determine how we can master and increase our revenue, but also control cost? And so historical analysis and critical assessment to actuals is important. And so that needs to be that iterative process again from a non-appropriated fund standpoint. So the third one is tuition. As the Air Force Academy Chief Financial Officer, I have vast experience with tuition. Okay, one person got my joke. So if you know the Air Force Academy, we don't charge tuition there. So again, we're 100% appropriated funding individuals. And so we get sons and daughters from all over the world that attend the Air Force Academy, and it's free of charge, with a catch that you're going to serve at least 4 years at the back end of that agreement. So we have a great graduation rate. However, I will tell you, and so this is a little bit of the area where I talked about I'm not the perfect fit for the job as a plug and play, but this is the place that I get to grow a little. But that doesn't mean I don't have a conceptual understanding of what tuition means. And so first, I would look at what the tuition rates are and how they're set. I would assume it's done by state policy or law. And then I would also look to determine how we maximize that. And so one of the really interesting things that I found as I was doing research on UVU was the open enrollment posture that we have here. Did some more research on that, and that's really impressive. Also, from a finance guy, it makes me a little nervous. Not a bad thing, right? But again, I'm growing too. And so what I would probably look for from a strategic leveraging position here on our tuition funding is to determine how we are recruiting. Is it we're just open and then we just hope people come in? If you look through the state of Utah, very unique in the sense that people still want to go to college, whereas other locations they're seeing that diminish. So how do we then not only open the doors and the aperture for folks to come in and pay us tuition to be able to go to school, but then how do we focus that on potentially some DE&I locations that are underserved or underrepresented? Or how do we hedge the strong military background up at Hill Air Force Base or other veterans across that have interest in being associated with UVU based on the pedigree? And so I would look at a very deliberate targeted approach to recruitment on that, and then obviously that would in turn increase levels of tuition. I had referenced it a couple times before, though. You can't just keep throwing money at stuff, right? And believe me, everyone wants me to, but you can't do that. And so there is a thing called a break-even analysis. It's a great tool to use, especially when you're trying to convey a message for a decision. And so I would do that break-even analysis associated with recruiting based on historicals. So Linda and I have already joked that when she retires and then I come in, that means, if I come in, excuse me, then I get to go and audit all of her books. She's like, that's fine though, because I'm retired. She didn't actually say that, so I'm going on camera. So the next point is institutional reallocations. And so nobody wants to lose money, and I told you we're on a definitive time scale here. So if we're looking through the fiscal year, what are we getting after? What is that strategic plan? And so really good at budgeting and making that plan. And then once I say at the very beginning of the year, you got $1 million in the School of Business, and then come mid-year, they've spent like $20,000. I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Looking at you. I'm trying to determine what's going on. And so you have to have the flexibility built into your financial plan to be able to maximize those resources. Now, nobody wants to lose the money, and I said that a couple times already, but you have to be willing to understand that the reallocation of institutional resources is at the benefit of the institution. It's not at the benefit of the individual department. And so what I would do is work through that calendar, backing it up 60 days to set some expectations of, hey, this is how I'm going to look at it to be able to provide this information to the president for a decision. It doesn't make me friends, but it doesn't make me enemies either, because I'm setting expectations. And I think that's really important when you're the unemotional, invested individual, especially when it comes to money. Because really what I care about is spending the money and making sure that it's the maximum impact associated with it. The milestones is really important, because once that milestone closes, that's when the calls start happening. Hey, what's going on? Let me know. Oh, well, we got a plan, it just delayed. Okay, that's fine. Or you know what, something changed and we want to use something else. Okay, it's too late in the year. Let me do something that based on a priority. So very important as I work through the strategic leveraging. There are 3 other things before I can wrap it up, and I think I'm right on time, which is the first for me in 24 years. Actually, this is the first time I've ever done this in civilian capacity, so this is right. I'm getting it right on the first one. So other sources and new funding streams. So what do I get the job. Go me. It's not that big of a deal in the sense that there's an expectation that I can perform the responsibility. But comptrollers, financial managers, chief financial officers, directors of finance, VPs of finance, whatever the term is you want to use, we are all scored very similarly. How much did you increase your bottom line? That is a very realistic metric that the boss would probably lay out for me to say that there is a 5-10% increase that is an expectation. And if I don't meet it, I need to have a narrative associated with it. And so this is how I would approach it. I'm going to set up a lot of meetings, and I'm going to do a lot of listening or ask leading questions associated with it. And getting down to the dean level, understanding what it is they would do with that extra $1 million, understanding how and why they need that money. And then what I want to be able to do is formulate a strategic narrative associated with finance, not just the overarching piece, but then align that financial narrative into the bigger piece. And so there's a drastic difference between what I do now and what I want to do at this university. And so I need to understand the culture, the dynamics of this great place. I walked from a building like that seemed a long way away. I don't remember exactly the name of the building, but it was a long way. And I was really impressed as I was walking through this infrastructure. And I was thinking to myself, how cool would it be as I walk through the Hall of Flags to just know that I get to be part of that. And so there's a culture and dynamic that I have to take and understand, but also that's going to come with a big slice of humility. Because right now, as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, I walk in and people stand up. I go through a gate in the morning and people salute me. That would all have to go to the side, and now I'm Mr. Casey Wyman, and I'm okay with that. Here's one. And as amazing as these last 24 years have been, getting into a new environment is a challenge that I really want, and I think that's listening is going to get me there a little bit faster. And so personal strengths. Outside of these amazing glasses, which my wife got for me this last holiday season because she said, we know we're thinking about retiring, you need something else besides your BCGs. If you've ever heard that term before, I'm going to break it down. It's called birth control glasses because the military issues them to young folks to make sure that they don't get dependents because they are not the prettiest things. So I really like them, but My wife's like, listen, you got to go with your Warbies. So we got these on right now. And so my personal strengths is I have a great ability, I think, to be able to think strategically when it comes to finances. And so I've just been doing this long enough to know that no action or decision is made without a financial impact, and I need to be involved in that, at least to be able to provide the perspective. It doesn't mean that I'm going to change the decision at all, but it's important to know that the president is informed from a financial picture. So thinking strategically is one of the aspects I think that I would be able to benefit, or the university would be able to benefit, especially from a new lens. And so I think jumping into that spot, knowing that Linda has been here for 43 years in some form or fashion, being a financial-minded individual is amazing. And when you step into that realm, it's not to replace Linda, right? It's to perpetuate her success into the next level. And so that would be really as I would take that strategic thinking approach. Also, it kind of makes sense from a team aspect that an active duty military member gets assigned to a new base every 2 years and you have to build a new team. So I could look at it on the short term as this is just a new assignment, knowing that I have the longer term, the ability to grow some roots here. And so building that team is important to me. And then also looking at how the team performs. One of the common questions in the military is, what's your leadership philosophy? And a lot of great senior leaders, a lot of great general officers have stood up in an environment on a stage with a big flag behind them and talk about leadership. And so I'm sad to say that I don't have a really catchy phrase, but I can tell you that my philosophy for leadership is more adaptive in nature than anything else. And so I believe that it is the responsibility of those individuals in the leadership position to be adaptive to the team's demands versus the other way around. So I don't want to come in with an iron fist and say, okay, Linda's out, this is the new law, and this is how it's going to work. That's not my approach. It would be to come in and talk a little bit and understand where they're coming from, and then be adaptive to their needs as they get what they need from their leadership and their supervisors, et cetera. And then the last part is just integrating thought. And so we'd referenced a couple of cases where we talked about the good idea fairy comes through. It's great. Now they want to come back and where's my money, right? Where's the money? Show me the money. You need to be able to integrate the holistic picture of the institution to be able to perform and make smart decisions. You can't just say it and then, you know what, whoever's loudest in the room is going to get the $1 million. Okay, ready, set, go. Right? And so that can't be the case anymore. It used to be the case probably a few years back, but that's just not acceptable. That's not respectful. That doesn't set a level of dignity and respect within the workforce. And so you got to be willing to pull that out of folks. And then my responsibility would be to integrate that across. And then this is the last part. Tell me where you fail, right? So where's my growth areas? I like the way you phrase it better than the way I would have phrased it, excuse me. And it's a new language. I already told you that I'd have to actually go to Men's Warehouse or Banana Republic and buy some new outfits. That's actually where I met my wife, was in Banana Republic, so that's a little bit of an inside joke. And so I got to learn the new language. I talked about having some humility on that end. Just walking over here, I got caught up in a few things I just didn't understand. I was like, I'm going to have to take a note on that one and figure that one out later. But hopefully, and what I've seen already in this just very short morning is there is a large aperture for welcoming new folks here. And so I think if I were to do an unofficial poll, there's probably a host of states represented in here just now. And then we all had to face that new isms of learning some of the Utah narrative, and then also down to the provost and then also into what it means to be part of the UVU family. And so, and then the last part is just you got to be willing to change. And I think that's more of a two-way street than just a one-way street. And so I know that I'm not the exact person that was there before, and the team is going to have to do some level of adapting to the new style, but I will also do the exact same thing, and because right now my boss is a 3-star, and 3-star tells you to do something, you're not really allowed to change that too much. And so I'm not saying that I would go against the president, but what I would say is there is a way of change of thinking from a new dynamic, right? And so I'm now going to be a civilian. I'm really excited about becoming a civilian, but knowing that I have to change my thinking on how I approach interactions now that Mr. Casey Wyman What does that mean when I interact with students? What does that mean when I act with peers or subordinates or senior members or whoever it may be? So all in all, I think there's a lot of growth that I can do. But I think from a pure technical standpoint, I can meet the mark relatively well with a high level of confidence there. And so, Stacy, she already left. All right, so I am literally right on time. Yay! All right, I want to be able to open up and save some time. They told me I'd give you guys 20 minutes to be able to fire some questions at me. I will tell you I'm an open book. Nothing's off limits. If it is off limits for some reason, that'd be strange, I think. So knowing that I have a little bit of dry sense of humor, dad humor in me, I'll try to minimize some of that, but I welcome your questions at this time.
Well, I'll kick it off.
All right. Thank you.
I went through basic training with the Wyman, by the way, but probably not related. But having some experience with the military, I understand command structure fairly well. And you're stepping kind of into the opposite. I wouldn't say that UVU would be considered a woke university, but shared governance is a key value of ours. Having come from the private sector, I found that very slow and frustrating at first, but over time I've come to value it deeply. It's very much why this is the joyful place it is to work. How would it is, you know the golden rule, right? He who controls the gold makes the rules. How would you handle that within the shared governance structure? What does that look like for you, especially coming from a command and control perspective?
Yeah. So the question is looking at shared governance, how would I adapt to that, and then potentially change the level of thinking. So first, thanks for being the first person to ask a question. I knew you were going to do it because you were the chair. So first, you welcome that, right? And so there's a drastic change from where I am now to where I want to be. And through the formal structure that I currently exists at the Air Force Academy, there are ways to influence that. And you can get pretty good at it as the chief financial officer. But in the end of the day, I think there's still a decision maker. And so with a shared governance process, there is still a decision maker that's there, but potentially not at the decision point where I'm used to. And so now it's start, end, decision made. Here, it seems like with shared governance, there's a lot more buy-in. And I'm okay with transparency, especially when it's at the benefit of the organization that you're working through. But that means that there's more messaging. And so if I'm going to be an open and shared, transparent corporate process to make a decision, that also means that there's probably going to be times where I'm up talking about why things are the way they are. And so getting that narrative down is hyper important to stay on message, to stay in line with what the president is trying to get after. And so you can have a transparent organization, but there's still a decision maker, and that narrative that she wants to perpetuate is now the vested responsibility of the VPs to be able to go through and say, this is what we want to do and why. And then I think she is humble enough to also accept feedback. Whereas if we are in a shared governance system, and then, you know what, instead of building that new soccer stadium, maybe that's not the right decision, we want to get after something else, I think she would be willing to listen. And I've yet to meet her, but this is just from online understanding. She has to be in that position, or she wouldn't, or she has to have that mentality, or she wouldn't be in that position. So I think that's how I'd approach it. I would welcome the ability to try something new. It would probably test me. It may frustrate me a little bit, but after being in command for multiple years, frustration is something you can just bury deep down inside your soul and never show anyone. Be steely-eyed killer if you need it. So good question. Thank you. Sir.
As you go through and you might have to reallocate funds, what is your approach to someone who you have to take some funds away from? How do you approach that conversation?
Yeah, so the question, and I'm repeating the question for the audio purposes, is through the process of reallocating funds, how do you then communicate that from the loser of the funds, right? And so I don't want to say loser, it's a bad term, I feel like it's a little negative. And so you have to transition from this is the decision for someone to lose or win and lose to education standpoint about finance. And so if you go back into the strategic calendar and back it up that time like I would want to and set those milestones and work through expectations, this is not going to be a surprise. And so if you're working at the engineering school and you know that those are coming and then you choose not to acknowledge that those decisions are coming, it's not going to be a surprise at when we hit that milestone and say, you know what, after, first why, let me understand it. Did something change? Because milestones are not complete processes and it's never transparent. But was there something that happened? Did a delay happen? Did the procurement process change? Was it higher and now you can't afford it? Was it lower and this is excess, right? And so there's a lot of different things that the financial side of a house needs to understand. And then while it is a rule, it is not like the golden rule. So there's ways to augment that and say, okay, you know what, this is actually a valid reason why you have it. Continue to press forward. Hopefully the president would delegate some authority to me to make those decisions, to be able to ensure that we can maintain a really good posture from a financial health standpoint. But really it's transitioning to an education standpoint, setting those expectations early, and then getting the buy-in. Now, you as the funds holder may not like it, but I don't think you're gonna disagree with it. Because there's going to be multiple times where I stand up in front of folks and say, this is the milestones. These are this is the schedule. I'm going to hold you to the schedule because we have to be able to utilize those scarce resources. Make sense? Hopefully it's kind of done that way now, but I don't know for sure. So, sir.
Can you talk more about your philosophy regarding break-even analysis and how that works with programs and departments and things like that?
Yeah, so a break-even analysis, there are some variations to it, but from the 20,000-foot level, Air Force term, what we don't want to do is have the optic of throwing money at things and then not getting any return on investment. And so if it's a established program or requirement or process, there should be really good historicals. And so if you ever want to get uncomfortable, ask an auditor to look at your historicals because they can get in there real deep and start finding things that you're like, ooh, probably need to have better supporting documentation. So when you look at varying levels of funds normalized through inflation or other external factors, you can see if they have a stagnant operating budget, and then you should be able to see their level of outcome or return on investment, right? And so when you think through recruiting, the ability for recruiters to travel directly impacts the ability of the outreach of the school, which should increase the ability for people to come in. Now, not every travel recruitment is going to be a success and it's going to be 100%. But what you should see is historical analysis to determine what that sweet spot is. And so if it's every $1 spent or every $10 spent on a recruiting yields us 10 students, at what point is there diminishing returns? Right, and so, and oftentimes we're going to see limitations, and so it's probably going to be people or time are your two biggest limitations, and so they only have so many recruiters until we need to hire a new recruiter. Well, that is going to be a bump up in that piece, and that would then dictate the break even associated with how much we're trying to achieve. And so you need to go into a pretty in-depth level to determine what's the desired end state. Once you've achieved the desired end state, for all my math people in here, then you can work the equation backwards, and then you can get to where you're looking at. Now, every estimate is wrong. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but as a cost estimator for the United States Air Force for a couple of years, I know every estimate is wrong. But I can get within a 90 to 95 to a 98 to a 99% level success based on the confidence and the risk that I've incurred. So again, it would inform. It wouldn't be definitive, but it would give us some light into making a resource decision should yield this, and then it should also inform future decisions as we move forward, right? So, yeah, it's a little painstaking at times. We call it business case analysis. You may have heard something like that before, but great ways, especially when you start leveraging new thought on how to do that versus the traditional way of thinking. Okay. Any other questions? You got me for 10 more minutes. But at the same token, I think there's a few other candidates too, so this may be the last 10 minutes. I'd be sad if it was.
Go on. Yeah, please.
Ma'am.
I hope this isn't inappropriate to ask. Do you have any personal connections that could benefit the university?
So yes. I'm just going to go on that end, and definitely not off the books. So my 5 years in DC has yielded a lot of relationships. And so that's always a good thing to get plugged in. However, when you look at this university, it's more state focused on some of the actions from a resourcing standpoint. That just means I'd have to get up to speed a little bit on who those key individuals are. And so from a pure appropriator standpoint, I think I could probably break that barrier relatively quickly just by the job title that I get. And so great philosophy. Colonel Shelley McNulty told me once, she says, your title will get you in your room, your credibility will get you an opinion in the room. And so very, very true. I can break through some barriers and then earn some credibility through those relationship building aspects within the state side. But definitely on the federal side, I know enough of the chief of staffs and the staffers that support the elected officials to be able to break through on the Utah side. And I would also say, and this is probably something that wasn't on the question menu, is I also come with a very strong network of veteran financial managers and other folks that I've interacted with over the years. And so when you're in for 24 years and you've moved 12 times, you meet a lot of people. Some people have never moved out of their home state, and I'm okay with that decision. That obviously wasn't my decision, but I think just the spectrum of who they've met is probably significantly lower than who I've interacted with, who I've influenced, who I've connected with. As I go back to the team development standpoint, who I've had positive impact with, and so I say that by saying there's a network of folks out there who want me to succeed. And then also want to be part of the team that I get to be part of. And so should we have vacancies across the financial management, I would assume that folks would express some level of interest to join that team. I know right now we are all probably in a very strange workforce. Are we going to work? Are we not going to work? What's the posture that we're working at, right? And so that means that we're perpetuating vacancies within our staffs, which means that work needs to be dissolved. That's very frustrating. Even on the federal side, we're seeing that at the academy. But a network, being part of a team is really important, especially to veterans. And so I think there would be a little bit of a benefit on that end too. Sir.
So you can come up through finance through a few different paths, right? So you can come up through corporate or public or government, and military is a little bit of its own creation. Mm-hmm. Having not come from these other spaces, but transitioning from military to kind of, I guess we would call this educational accounting, or something along those lines. Our dean's an accountant, and I can see him thinking about that. What strengths and uniqueness do you bring from military that could be applied here that might help us to do things better?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
What are lessons that you already think you could bring that aren't necessarily here?
Okay. First, I want to compliment you on your fashion choice today, because you have very similar taste than I do. And so what I would say is the federal side has a lot of resources just because of the nature of what you do, right? And so I don't know all of the ins and outs. I don't know where the skeletons are in these closets across the hallway here. But what I would be able to do is look at it from a resource perspective of what I know. I'm very comfortable on the federal side from an accounting standpoint of an auditability of a I want to say audit readiness, but I don't know if that necessarily resonates with some folks. And so there's an ability to pass an open audit that the government is going through right now that we're getting hammered on. But there's an environment that specifically within the Department of the Air Force has been said is that we welcome the auditors. And so instead of being combative and like, no, that's not right, it's okay, show us how to do our jobs better. And so that has permeated down through the ranks from my 2-star all the way down to where I sit. And so you have to have a willingness to accept some of that. And so as I go into my 60-day plan about listening to folks, I would be really interested in to determine what they dislike about their job, and then work through a narrative to say that there's actually probably some goodness there. One of the things that we struggle with on the federal side is supporting documentation from historical purchases. And so you're supposed to do 3 quotes, you're supposed to determine a whole bunch of various things, and you're supposed to keep all of that. You're supposed to keep it in a file location, you're supposed to make sure it's auditability, because in 5 years, when that money expires, you need to go back and validate it, close it out, and call it good. It doesn't happen because we rotate so quickly, and then new philosophies come in, and then what's the fire of the day? We got to put that out, and then we forgot about something else. And so there's a process there, I think, that you can look at and then work through improving it, and then increasing it for the next guy or girl that comes into this positions. And so what I would say to answer your question directly is first, listen to folks of where they have that concern based on their current status, and then hedge my experience from a federal resourcing standpoint to potentially influence some of those processes. I would probably keenly look into DE&I programs, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think you guys swapped around some of the letters at one point. Not important, but as you look through that program, I mean, that is a hot topic program right now, right? If you can't open the web page, I was going to say newspaper, but you can't open a web page and not talk about some level of what we're getting right or what we're getting wrong. And so in the federal side, we have a designated individual, but we also have equal opportunity, a designated individual. We also have various other offices that provide direct support to not only the staff and the students, but everyone in between, to ensure that they're setting that culture and climate within the employed force. So I look through those offices to determine if they're resourced correctly, what level of reach they have. Is there something that we could do a little bit better to make it not only the morale is high and the safe, but can we keep pushing that a little bit higher to make it even more of the premier institution? And so it's kind of a loaded question. I think process-based, kind of the squishy side of it too, from a program stance. But in the end, I'm not coming in with these are all the new rules, because this is what it is. I'm going to do a lot of listening and then try to hedge the experience that I have, which is vast, to be able to improve those, or at least ask the question, maybe I learned something along the way when you look from a GASP to a FAST accounting standards. Yep. Did I get that right on the accounting side? Right? Okay.
Thank you for all the questions. I want to make sure that we do wrap up on time, both to manage his time as well as the next candidate. Let's give Casey a hand.